behalf of the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, the US Green Building Council, the Energy and Resources Institute, and the GRIHA Council, would like to extend a very warm welcome to you all. I would now request, I understand Professor Gowda has to rush for an urgent meeting, and I would request him to come to the dais and kindly share his thoughts. Professor Gowda is a member of the Rajya Sabha, the upper house of the India's parliament, representing the state of Karnataka. Until recently, he was a professor of economics and social services at the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore and a director on the Central Board of the Reserve Bank of India. He has taught courses including environmental policy, decision analysis, and risk management, and doing business in India at universities in Europe and North America. May I now request Professor Gowda to please come and address the audience.
Thank you, Priyanka. Dr. Srivastava, Dr. Mini Mazumdar, Mr. Amit Kumar, my friends, it's a tremendous pleasure to be here this morning with each and every one of you. There's been a little bit of a crisis because of the headlines that you've seen in the newspaper. The fact that our former Prime Minister, my party's leader, Dr. Manmohan Singh, has been called by the CBI court to testify, and so all Congress MPs are going to be marching in solidarity with him by 10 o'clock in the morning. So I do need to share whatever views I have with you and then disappear. I hope you understand. Well, I must say that when Dr. Srivastava asked me whether I'd be happy to come and engage with all of you, I said this is the most, one of the best things I could be doing in Delhi, other than being in Parliament, which is to be with a bunch of people who are out there at the cutting edge of technology. People who are, focusing on how to build a more energy efficient and resource efficient India. When India goes to climate change negotiations, we talk about how we have an advantage over others because we have a low carbon impact lifestyle. And that, is essentially true because we lead simple lives. We cook food which is fresh. We don't refrigerate. We don't have this great packaging and shipping industry for food and products like that. And the vast majority of us, of course, take public transport. And therefore, just in terms of lifestyle, when you compare with advanced industrial economies, we are certainly a low carbon impact country, a low carbon impact society. But things are changing, and that's where you all come in. And how are they changing? Well, let me just tell you, I'm from Bengaluru, and I grew up in essentially an air-conditioned city. In June, while you are all sweltering here, we take out our sweaters. The monsoon hits the west coast, and we are, we start to have a cool breeze early in the morning in Bangalore. So that used to be the way Bangalore was. All the years that I grew up, I spent about 20 years growing up there, then about 17 years in the US before I returned in 2000. But most recently, about 2 years ago, in April, May, in my 4th floor apartment where the roof is above my head, it was unbelievably hot. And so I finally succumbed and installed an air conditioner. Now, for a true is a real shock to the system. It's a shock because it sort of tells you that something, you're experiencing a change in the climate directly. And so that's, but that's just not me. If you actually look everywhere around Bangalore, the green cover is decreasing, and this tremendous growth. New offices are coming up, new apartment buildings are coming up, but they're coming up in a manner that is actually going to worsen the overall local conditions, weather and climate conditions, and create even more demand for air conditioners. There are lots of apartment buildings and certainly office buildings that are, transplanted from some other part of the world. And, so you have a west-facing building encased in glass. It's probably an oven during many months, during the afternoons. And given that, it seems like what we've done is create, bring this problem onto ourselves. We are designing and building structures which are going to require a huge amount of investment in continuous energy inputs just to keep cool and to be functional. Now that is really, that's really a challenge to the system. Now, we can turn things around if we have some sense. The nice part is it's not too late. I have been to China, I've seen Pudong and places like that, which could be, again, transplants from Manhattan in terms of the skyline. But India is nowhere, maybe except in Gurgaon or places like that, nowhere close to building the office structures of tomorrow. And certainly for the 700 million youngsters that we have housing that is still to actually emerge. So we are talking about all this, working on this at the right time. We're talking about it at a time when we can, if we get some sense, if we can find a way to have that sense in architectural design, in building codes, in public policy, we can still preempt and prevent that kind of a future. So what, so what can we do and what should we be thinking about and doing? That's really the question before us. And I'm trying to think about where I sort of re-engaged with all this some time ago. I used to teach environmental and energy policy. I'm certainly aware of demand-side management and the kinds of initiatives that can be taken by users to lower energy loads, energy demands. And so in that sense, we're all part of that domain. How can we change the nature of structures of the built environment of cities themselves? I think today's focus is on cities on a much larger scale to ensure that our overall impact is minimized, our running costs are lowered. But for me, the light bulb went off when I went to Infosys a few years ago and attended a conference where one of the speakers today, Rohan Parekh, gave a talk about his work in Infosys. And then, as I said, a light bulb went off. It was an LED light bulb. It was not an incandescent light bulb. It was a very energy efficient light bulb. I say that because Rohan talked about the kind of work he was doing in Infosys in redesigning not just the working environment, but retrofitting the architecture of their own campus. And he talked about fairly audacious goals in terms of energy, the decrease in energy use. And he was reporting the fact that they had actually achieved those audacious goals. And that for me was like amazing, because I said, my God. And when I engaged with him some more as part of that conference, we discovered that the ideas that he had come up with were not necessarily ones that he dreamed up himself. He had picked them up from paying attention to traditional architecture in different parts of India. So when we think about traditional architecture, we find that India has so many different climatic zones, and there are numerous locally adapted architectural styles that have evolved over time. But in today's environment where everyone wants some kind of a fancy concrete structure, we are ignoring what is appropriate for the local climatic zone. And so you have flat roofs in the hill regions of Karnataka where it rains like crazy. So that's all essentially inappropriate. But if you think about the kinds of wisdom that was already encapsulated and encoded in our buildings that we've inherited, you have thick walls in some places, you have high roofs in some places. In certain rainy parts of Karnataka, you have courtyard houses. So you have all kinds of arrangements that make a huge difference in terms of the design which works in that local environment. And historically, we've also had communities where people essentially walked to work, lived close to markets and things like that. And that's changing as we sort of cater, as we ape the Western car-driven suburban model, which then entails huge challenges in terms of both energy use and in terms of overall impact on people's lives and lifestyles. So, so there is that knowledge out there. And part of our challenge is to find a way to distill that knowledge, build a bridge between that ancient wisdom and our current practices, our current understanding of the science of architecture, science of urban design, and to find a way to make sure that this is then communicated with everybody else. And when I say communicated with everybody else, there are different groups that we need to communicate with. One is our own community of architects and designers and others, so that cutting-edge knowledge about this is shared, and that our own community does not go down the wrong path in some ways. You also have to communicate with potential users through newspaper articles, through TV shows, through all kinds of other methods which would ensure that people understand that there are easier, cheaper, in the longer run, methods of designing a house, designing an apartment complex, an office building. And of course, you need to communicate with policymakers so that we come up with rules and regulations, laws and incentives that will ensure that there is a harmony between these ideals and the kind of environment that ensures that people's actions are also goaded in the right direction. If you say an energy efficient building which gets a very good GRIHA rating will get a more floor area ratio, FSI, something like that, then suddenly you match the incentives with this very, very positive agenda. So when you think about those kinds of communication, I would also urge that we need working models. We need models that demonstrate to us that such things are actually possible. Because if you go to an apartment complex today, what do you find? The builder is will take you through model apartment and show you how beautiful everything is, right? We need to learn from that community of builders and ensure that people can get to experience the kind of built environment that we are suggesting is most appropriate from an energy efficiency, resource management perspective. And this may require different kinds of models in different parts of the country. And so one of the challenges that I would lay before you is to ensure that there are such places with guides that will ensure that people can experience what it would be like to actually live or work in such spaces. Simultaneously, I would urge you to also be magnanimous and share energy efficient designs and information on the internet. It is a world of open source and things like that. But a lot of people may not want to go and hire somebody, but if a design is available, if information is readily accessible, those who cannot afford may still be able to take these ideas and go forward with them. And then, when I think about evangelizing, I think about other ways we need to communicate. Many of my fellow politicians are firm believers in certain other historical, cultural practices like astrology and Vastu. I myself am not. And I think you can excuse them, especially astrology, because it is such an uncertain world. People figure that it's not what they do, but what the planets have in mind for them. Anyway, but the point is, the other concept of Vastu is something that I was not particularly familiar with, in the 1980s when I left for the US. But by the time I came back to India in 2000, it was, everyone is busy talking about it. The Chief Minister of Telangana has recently caused some multi-crore restructuring of his office building to account for it. And, people are coming to visit my house opposite Lodi Gardens to say, okay, this is right, you put something there. And I said, look, I don't believe in it. My location is Vastu enough. And the point is, I'm not trying to belittle or question anybody's beliefs. But here, what I want to communicate is, there may be some element of science in some of these things, I don't know. But to the extent that you can also find a way to communicate energy efficient design principles in a manner, in a language that also matches the language of that historical, cultural practice, then you might find more adherents, more people who will say, oh, if we do this, it is actually compliant with that too. Then you certainly have a much easier job in selling whatever we're trying to sell. And so I would just, I have no idea what the actual overlap between those principles and these are, but it's certainly something that I would urge you to explore, something that could make it easier to popularize and implement the kinds of changes that we want to implement. Anyway, Leena ji did mention to me that I would be speaking to the converted. And so that has been a bit of a challenge to try and figure out what new I could actually add. But let me just say that if India is going to be a sustainable, sustainable country, a sustainable civilization, a country that has less impact on the environment, on energy resources, then we will achieve that goal only if you succeed in your mission. It is each and every one of you here who are working towards better urban design, who are working towards better building design, who are working towards changing the way people live and their lifestyles, that it's only if you succeed that we will actually achieve that futuristic goal, that really idealistic goal that we all have. So let me conclude by wishing you all the success in this mission. I will be there from whatever I can do in Parliament, not just me, but across party lines. I did bring this up in my speech on the power sector, my maiden speech, and the power minister listened carefully. So there are numerous ways in which we can all work together, us on the policy side, all of you on the science and technology and architecture side, and we can make this mission succeed. Only when we make that mission succeed will we achieve that really futuristic but appropriate goal that we must strive for. So I wish you all the very best in your endeavors and look forward to seeing your successes dot the countryside from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Bhuj to Arunachal Pradesh, wherever. Okay, all the very best, and thank you.
Request for a small video clip to be played, please.
आओ घर बनाएं रोशनी के, लहलहाती धूप के, खिलखिलाते गीत से। आओ घर बनाएं बारिशों के गीत से, जो समा जाए फिर से जमीन में, जो सूरज को छाने दिनों दिन रात की चौखट के लिए। आओ बनाए ऐसे घर जिसको और भी करनी हो बातें, सिर्फ ईंट और दीवार की नहीं, पर सांस लेने की, जोड़ने की कड़ी जिंदगी से। आओ घर बनाएं।
In keeping with our tradition, may I now request our guests to light the lamp of knowledge and illumination and inaugurate our national conference. Thank you very much. May I now request Mr. Amit Kumar to enlighten us with his remarks and welcome the audience. Mr. Kumar is Senior Fellow at TERI and Vice President of the GRIHA Council. He has been working on the development and diffusion of cleaner and renewable energy resources based on technological solutions for over 28 years. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Priyanka. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of GRIHA Council and on my personal behalf, I would like to welcome you to this 6th edition of GRIHA Summit 2015, which is centered around high-performance habitats. In fact, as per original agenda, I was supposed to have the first word, but the politics played spoil sport. Now, why I'm saying that? I'm saying that because now I'm in a situation where many of the points which I wanted to touch upon have already been covered by Professor Gowda. Nonetheless, let's see, how do I manage? I would like to bring your attention to the 5th assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and I am quoting that. It says that in 2010, the building sector accounted for around 32% final energy use and 8.8 gigatons of CO2 emissions. It further states that energy demand is projected to approximately double and CO2 emissions to increase by 50 to 150% by mid-century if we move in baseline scenario. Now let's also look at some other numbers. Today, 54% of world's population lives in urban areas, a proportion that is expected to increase to 60% by 2050. 2014 UN's report on world urbanization prospects states that the largest urban growth will take place in India, China, and Nigeria. In fact, it has been estimated that by 2050, India alone would be adding about 404 million urban dwellers. Now, if we put all these numbers together, it becomes imperative that we push the boundaries in the building sector. In fact, it becomes very obvious that mere tinkering with energy efficiency in a normal fashion won't take us to the challenges we have. Because on one hand, we have challenges of rapid urbanization, and on the other hand, we have a situation where we are facing dwindling resources. So how do we cope up with that? And that's where high-performance buildings and habitats come into picture. These are essentially buildings which are designed for economic and environmental performance over its lifetime, taking into account local, cultural, and social needs, and also taking into account whatever local resources which are available over there, whether for energy perspective or from perspective of the construction itself. And in this scenario, what is imperative, therefore, is that we need to leapfrog to the next generation of buildings and habitats and urban planning, rather than moving into our traditional incremental fashion. The latest trend in this context is also about net zero, or at times energy positive buildings. And as the name suggests, these are the buildings where whatever energy demands are there in the buildings, those are met through energy generation within the buildings themselves. And those are largely based on renewable energy resources, as well as whatever waste energy resources are available over there. But in case of, if we define high-performance buildings or habitats, these are something which goes beyond only energy, because these look at all the resources in more holistic fashion. And where emphasis is not only to use all the resources optimally, but also reuse whatever is waste being generated even after optimization, everything. I think it won't be out of way to, for me to dwell a bit on GRIHA Council also, which till very recently was known as Adarsh. It's a non-for-profit society which is mandated to propagate green buildings and habitats. It's essentially an independent platform which provides interactive media for like-minded people to see that how India and our adjoining neighbors can actually move into the direction where we are talking not only talking, but also translating those talks into implementation as far as green buildings are concerned. And the three main activities of GRIHA Council pertain to the issuance of GRIHA rating, the capacity building, and advocacy. I'm happy to share that till date we have about 575 buildings with an aggregated footprint of over 21 million square meters that have been registered for GRIHA certification. And in addition, states like Punjab, Kerala, Assam, Rajasthan, Delhi, and Sikkim have adopted GRIHA to ensure implementation of sustainable habitats in their states. GRIHA is also well aligned with some of the key national initiatives such as Smart Cities Initiative and Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. The summit intends to showcase the latest developments in design and execution of high-performance habitats. And I look forward to the fruitful discussion, which I am sure would enable us to chart out course of action and roadmap to move India towards, in fact, I wanted to say smarter India, but I thought that that's too cliched a term nowadays. So should I say more environmentally smarter India? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I would now like to request Dr. Leena Srivastava to kindly give her address. Dr. Leena Srivastava is currently the Acting Director General of TERI and is a member of various committees and boards, both at the international and at the national levels. She serves on the Executive Committee of Sustainable Energy for All, an initiative of the UN Secretary General. At the think tank and scientific levels, Dr. Srivastava is a part of the Scientific Advisory Panel on the Climate and Clean Air Coalition to reduce short-lived climate pollutants and on the International Advisory Board of various organizations and the Research Advisory Committee of the WWF of India. She is also an independent and non-executive director on the boards of Bharti Infratel Limited and Shree Cement Limited, and on the board of Meridian Institute, the World Environment Center, Stockholm Resilience Center. She is a member for the Council of Advisors for Fraunhofer India, the Sustainable Development Advisory Board, the Caterpillar Inc. USA, and the Senior Advisory Group, Cement Sustainability Initiative of the World Building Council on Sustainable Development. Dr. Srivastava also serves on the research advisory boards of the Institute of Global Environmental Strategies, Japan, and the Wuppertal Institute for Climate in Germany. May I request Dr. Srivastava, please.
Thank you very much, Priyanka, and a very good morning to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who may have come in slightly late and are not aware of what happened, we had Professor Rajeev Gowda with us this morning, who is a member of Parliament in the Rajya Sabha, but he had to leave slightly early because the Congress party is staging a march in support of Dr. Manmohan Singh, who is, as you all know, been summoned by the courts for his role or alleged role in during the time that he was the coal minister in the country. So Professor Gowda was kind enough to still come early and deliver his talk. And I think he gave a wonderful talk and made some very relevant points, a couple of which I will refer to as I go along in what I wanted to share with you. The reference to climate change has been there, I think, through all the speakers. Professor Gowda made a reference to it. My colleague Amit Kumar made a reference to it. And we normally talk about everything that we are doing, especially on the efficiency side and on the renewables, in the context of the contribution that these activities on efficiency and enhanced renewables can make to reducing the contribution of greenhouse gases, to mitigating climate change as it is happening. But I think the other thing that the IPCC reports have recognized, both in the 4th assessment report as well as now in the 5th assessment report that has just come out, is that the climate is already changing. We are no longer talking about only projections, but there are observed changes in climate that we have been able to document. and that there is a committed climate change, that no matter what we do in terms of actions to mitigate emissions of greenhouse gases, this amount of change in the climate will happen. And this is well documented. I'm not going to spend time in discussing what are the kinds of committed climate changes that we are under. But at the observed level, I think it is curious if you look at it. You know, in Delhi, there was a very nice comment for those of you who also use social media, I think last week or was it the week before last, that said that in the 1 week time period, we went from winter to summer to monsoon back to winter. You know, it was a really strange change. I mean, of course, these are weather changes. We can't link it to climate change. But, you know, these are things that we've all started talking about and observing, that there are changes. The east coast of the United States has experienced the coldest winter ever in the last several decades. And yesterday or day before, you know, Italy experienced in 18 hours, which is in the span of 1 day, 100 inches of snow. I mean, that was amazing. So several things are happening which keep reinforcing to us the fact that the climate as we know it, and this is what Professor Rajeev Gowda also, you know, made, and he alluded to it, that the climate as we know is changing. So when we talk about energy efficiency, renewables, and enhancing, you know, performance on all of these factors, it's not only about how we are contributing to a further climate change, but somewhere I think we need to recognize that when we are undertaking our planning exercises, when we are strategizing for the future, we do need to take into account the fact that this climate is changing. We often talk about it in the context of hydropower projects. Hydropower projects typically are designed looking at the past 100 years of data on flows in rivers and so on, to be able to design the height of dams, the strength, and their you know, dam break analyses that is undertaken, and so on and so forth. But today, especially when you're talking about rivers that are fed by glaciers, you can no longer use the historical data of the last 100 years, because what you will see in the next 100 years is likely to be very, very different to what we had experienced in the last 100 years. In a similar fashion, I think when we are talking about designing buildings and planning for green buildings, there is a certain design, there is a certain performance achievement that we might aim for, which is based on current climatic conditions. But buildings also have a fairly long life. And I guess the challenge on us is also going to be, amongst several other challenges that you all are already familiar with, is also going to be how are we going to factor in the likely changes in climatic factors. The Professor Rajeev Gowda, the Honorable Member of Parliament from Rajya Sabha, spoke about the heat island effect, which is as a result of what we are doing to our urban areas. But there is this, you know, projected or almost committed climate change that we have, that we also need to be able to plan for. And I did want to mention that before I move into a much more grounded kind of a few slides that I wanted to share with you. It's not a presentation, it doesn't merit being called a presentation, but just a few slides that I thought I would share with you on this. The other thing that I shared, and I was happy to hear Professor Gowda also talk about it, yesterday there was a small side event, special event that we had, wherein I made the observation that while we do want to move people to occupy greener buildings, to subject their own habitats to audits, etc., while there are energy service companies that are coming forward to provide the services that are required to move buildings in the direction in which we want them to move, it is also important that we empower people to undertake a certain basic diagnostics by themselves. And I think Professor Rajeev Gowda also made a reference to the same, wherein he said that, you know, we must empower people through the use of information technology, web-based platforms, etc., in making at least some basic level decisions. Of course, when you move to a higher level of sophistication, there is a lot more service that needs to be provided. But I think we need to look at this kind of mix and match and, in the process excite people to know that there is a huge potential, that the economics work in their favor, that there are certain things that they can do by themselves and certain others for which they have to reach out to a wider community for help. Having said all of that, let me just very quickly share with you a few slides, as I said, that talk about India's situation. I don't seem to be, okay, there we are. What this slide is basically showing you is the overall energy requirements in our country and how they are likely to go if we are to follow the same path of development that we are on today. We have a small group in our organization that works on this kind of a large-scale modeling exercise and are constantly looking at improving our ability to look at what our pathways of development are going to do, not only in terms of energy, although I'll be presenting to you the energy scenario here today, but also in terms of water and other resources that we are likely to be consuming. And what you see over here is that we are going to see a fairly large increase in energy consumption from about 700 million tons of oil equivalent in the year 2011-12 to about 2000 in the year 2031-32. And if we don't have any strong interventions, we will continue to be dominated by coal for meeting our energy requirements. Having said that, and the reason why I'm spending a little bit of time on this is because obviously buildings also have a huge impact on electricity, as was pointed out by previous speakers as well, and coal is largely going in for electricity consumption, for electricity generation purposes. At a Government of India level, if I may take a quick step back, and for those of you who are interested in the power sector, say that, we have experienced electricity shortages. We have experienced, each one of us, whether we are in the industrial or commercial or institutional context or whether we are in a residential context, these enormous shortages of electricity. And we have all experienced the fact that we have moved to coping mechanisms that are much, much, much more expensive. And I'm saying this on the basis of detailed analyses that we had done. These coping mechanisms are much more expensive than looking at several other options, which includes efficiency and a move to renewables as well. But, today, if you look at the policies that we are putting in place, we have a huge target to increase our coal production and double it in the coming couple of years to 1 billion tons because our power plants are not able to get the coal supplies and are not able to supply electricity to buildings, institutional buildings, commercial buildings, etc. And we are relying on diesel-based power generation. So the demand for diesel for purposes of energizing buildings has gone up tremendously in the last, especially 5 years, I would say. These policies need to be consistent, and that's the reason why I'm bringing it to your attention. We increase our coal production to 1 billion tons. The quality of the coal in India is very poor. If we continue to use them in the power plants that would use this quality coal, obviously it's going to be inefficient. It is going to result in a lot of pollution, both at a local as well as a global level. But if we want to move to the most sophisticated technologies, then our coal is not the coal that we are looking at. We have to start relying on imports once again. And what I'm going to show you on the basis of this particular slide in particular that is talking about the increase in our energy demand is that this will also result in a high level of vulnerability for the country. We would be importing huge amounts of every form of fossil energy if we continue along a business as usual path. If we cannot use our domestic resources that are available, if we should not use, not cannot, if we should not use the domestic resources that are available to us. So our import dependence on oil, which is currently at about 76%, is likely to go up to 95%. Do we want that? And in this oil basket, I think diesel is a critical part of it, all the auto fuels as well as gas, the LPG fractions. Our import dependence on coal is likely to increase from 100 million tons in 2011-12, which was about 23% of our overall energy demand, to 1,000 million tons in 2031-32, if we continue to increase demand. And as was pointed out, I think buildings can, and especially the new stock of buildings with the urbanization patterns that Amit spoke about, can effect almost a 50% savings in their electricity consumption if we do the jobs that we are supposed to be doing. And similarly, if we thought that we were comfortable on natural gas, I think we need to worry about that as well. So on the fossil front, we have a major problem in the country, but we do have enormous renewable energy resources that till recent times were significantly more expensive than the energy that we were able to source from fossil energy. But today, I think these numbers have become much more comparable, which is not to say that renewable energy is still completely competitive as far as fossil energy is concerned, but we are very fast converging to a level where renewable energy will very soon in the next few years become fully competitive with fossil energy. So that brings me to the next point, which I will possibly refer to in the later slides as well, which is that today we are giving a lot of emphasis on solar rooftop systems. There is an estimation, and I'll give you the numbers in just a short while. But there is a requirement. Haryana, for example, has already said that all buildings on plot sizes greater than 500 yards, should have solar rooftop systems, and there are certain guidelines that they have put in place. And what is interesting is that while they have put this requirement on buildings of all kinds, people are struggling. I know my own colleagues and friends who have called me, because I live in DLF in Gurgaon, and have said that there's this new regulation that has come up and we want to be compliant, but how do I know which vendor to go to? How do I know who to trust? How do I know that the investments that I'm making are not going to vanish in thin air in a period of time? And the only reason why I'm flagging this at this time is to say that while we might be looking at this whole challenge of moving to more efficient, better performance buildings from our own lens, when you approach a customer or a consumer, he wants the total package. He wants to see what the costs are. He wants to see what the financial instruments are. He wants to see what the performance guarantees are. He wants to see what the reliability is. He wants to make sure that this is going to sustain over a period of time, etc. And the entire community of people that are going to give comfort to that end-use customer, consumer, need to come together and ensure that you are providing that comfort that people are looking for. But that was a quick aside on the presentation that I wanted to make. Apart from the climate change issues, in terms of air pollution and local challenges, again, which very starkly shows we are going to be in a major problem. I think Delhi has already been, or if not the topmost, it's competing for the topmost spot as far as air pollution is concerned. We used to talk about a couple of Chinese cities till last year, but today I think it is Delhi that we are talking about. And this is how the picture is likely to change in the future. We would suffer very large and unacceptable mortality levels as a result of the air pollution that is taking place. And this again is critically important, because with the kinds of urbanization that Amit referred to, with the increase in energy consumption that you will see in urban habitats, and with the fact that buildings contribute to about 50% of the electricity demand, in particular with whether it is coal-based power plants or the diesel backup systems that we are talking about, and of course transport is a key area, but I think there is a huge impact that we can make in these areas that we need to be cognizant of. Just to very quickly move on to talk about the opportunities. I mean, we did alternative scenarios, and we have driven these scenarios with considerations of energy security, that we don't want to be 95% dependent on oil imports. We don't want to be importing 1 billion tons of coal into this country with all the vulnerabilities, with all its infrastructure requirements, with all its movement that would be required within the city, within the country. So therefore, you know, what is it that we can do aggressively to follow a different energy path? And what you will see is that there is a reduction, if you focus on the last 3 bars on the right-hand side of this particular chart. There is these 3. There is a significant reduction in the height of the bars that shows what is the contribution that can be made as a result of efficiency improvements across different sectors. And then, of course, the different lengths of the shaded bars that you see are a change in the mix of energy consumption that is possible. And here again, I think buildings have a huge contribution to make, because I mentioned earlier about the solar rooftop systems that we are talking about, or there are other building integrated interventions. There is, of course, energy efficiency, so there's, you know, it will also contribute to the overall increase, reduction in the height of the bars. But I think there are opportunities that are available to us. It is imperative upon us to ensure that we do not, as we are experiencing these very rapid rates of economic growth, which we saw earlier, which we are heading back to today, as we experience these very high rates of economic growth, we do not lock ourselves into development pathways that we will then be struggling with to try and correct as we go along. Because the other thing we need to keep in mind is that as far as the international scientific consensus goes, reflected in the IPCC report, that our window of opportunity at a global level, not at a country level, at a global level that we have, to bend the curve of emissions of greenhouse gases goes only up to the year 2020. And a number of interventions, while India has come up with a number of very positive policy changes, a lot of them would really start coming into effect after this time period that we are talking about, because of where we are. And our momentum is actually pretty huge. So the need for acceleration, the need for coordination, need for concerted action is much, much, much higher today than we have ever had in the past, both for global reasons as well as for domestic reasons. And it is for this reason, I think, that this particular conference, which is taking forward a lot of the initiatives that all of you have started on, you know, should succeed. And I would like to wish you all the very best, and just close with this one final number that really talks about this market potential for rooftop, which I said I would mention. But how do you actualize this? How do you make sure that this and other interventions that all of you are talking about happen in a systemic sense, in a holistic sense, you know, making sure that we are not only ambitious of at the scales that, you know, the Prime Minister has announced, in the Finance Minister has announced in this particular budget, of going up to 175,000 megawatts of renewable energy by the year 2022. Good objective to have. How do we get there? And I think the how-to question is something that all of us need to be able to deliberate upon and take it back also to the governments. So thank you very much, and wish you all the very best.
Thank you, Dr. Srivastava. It has been a long and arduous journey for all of us present here, but I think it has been a fruitful one. We would like to thank all those who have been a part of this journey, and without whose effort, GRIHA would not have reached and attained this height. May I now request Dr. Leena Srivastava, Mr. Amit Kumar, and Madam Millie Majumdar to please come forward to felicitate the leading lights whose extraordinary support in adoption, promotion, and outreach of GRIHA has taken GRIHA to the next level of excellence. Please come. I now request Mr. Divakar Garg, Director General, Central Public Works Department, to please come on the stage. The Central Public Works Department, under the Ministry of Urban Development, as a trendsetter and benchmaker for buildings in the government sector, is a pioneering initiative adopted GRIHA in March 2009. That is, even before the Committee of Secretaries, on initiative of the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, under the chairmanship of Cabinet Secretary, endorsed its adoption and implementation for all central government departments. Thank you so much, sir. May I now call upon Mr. N.P. Agarwal, the Executive Director of NBCC, and Madam Kalika Jain, the Assistant Manager from NBCC. The NBCC, like the CPWD, has also mandated minimum 3-star GRIHA compliance for all its building projects and has an MOU with TERI for support and assistance in the areas of green buildings and habitats. Recently, to ensure proper implementation of GRIHA and its projects countrywide, the NBCC organized intensive and extensive training and capacity building programs as well. It is now being led by Mr. Amit Kumar, who is a dynamic leader and heading the NBCC. May I now request Madam Anamika Prasad to please come on the stage. She has over 19 years of working experience in projects dealing with energy efficiency and has been working on sustainable habitats. Anamika founded the Environmental Design Solutions earlier in 2002 and currently leading development of net zero energy building strategies, supporting the Energy Conservation Building Code program of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Mr. Anurag Bajpai, Director of Green Tree Building Energy Private Limited. Mr. Anurag is a graduate from the Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee, and presently one of the directors at the Green Tree Building Energy Private Limited, which provides its services primarily in the energy domain. Mr. Bajpai. Mr. Parmender Sahil, the Vice Chairman, Lotus Greens, to please come on stage. As Vice Chairman and founding member of Lotus Greens, Mr. Sahil is responsible for giving directors an overall business strategy and taking key investment decisions of the firm. He has been instrumental in formulating various company policies and mainstreaming GRIHA in the upcoming projects of Lotus Greens. Madam Swati Puchapalli Reddy from Terra Viridis. Ms. Swati is the founding partner and director of Terra Viridis, an environmental design consultancy that she started several years ago. Terra Viridis has worked across several sectors ranging from policy research to environmental consultancy for corporates, institutions, and government agencies. Madam Purva Keskar and Mr. Kulkarni, who are directors at the VKE Environmental, and Madam Keskar is the principal in charge of Masters of Architecture at the Brick School of Architecture in Pune. The VKE organization has been consistently engaged with GRIHA and promotion of GRIHA in Maharashtra and throughout the country. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Leena. Thank you, Amit. May I now request Mrs. Millie Majumdar to kindly propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Priyanka. Of course, Professor Gowda had to leave, but nonetheless, we should thank him for his honored presence. Professor M.B. Rajeev Gowda, Honorable Member of Parliament in Rajya Sabha, Government of India, Acting Director General TERI, and Acting President of GRIHA Council, Dr. Leena Srivastava, Vice President GRIHA Council, Shri Amit Kumar, Excellencies, members of the media, delegates, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and colleagues from TERI and TERI University. It is my pleasant duty to propose a vote of thanks at the conclusion of the inaugural session of the GRIHA Summit, 6th edition of the annual event organized by TERI and GRIHA Council with support from the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Government of India. I begin first by expressing our sincere thanks to Professor Gowda for gracing the occasion and for his inspirational speech. Sincere thanks to Dr. Leena Srivastava, and Mr. Amit Kumar for setting the context of the two-day summit. My special thanks to continued leadership at TERI, as GRIHA would not have existed had it not been envisioned by the leaders at TERI who guided its development and application. Our thanks to all patrons who have been felicitated today and several others who are continually taking forward the mission of GRIHA and sustainable habitat in the country. A sincere thanks to all our sponsors, exhibitors, partners and delegates for their continued support and time. Sincere thanks to the staff of the India Habitat Center for all logistic support. We would like to thank the media and our distinguished guests and delegates. And finally, a big thanks to the TERI family for its unstinted support and involvement in organizing this event. Thank you very much. We would now request all of you to join us for inauguration, for opening of the exhibition, and we meet here at 11.